All right. Hello, everybody. Hope you all are doing well. This is DFS Army's tournament strategy show where we'll talk about last night. I couldn't find or couldn't get it, the winning lineup for last night. That was down, but we'll talk about it. And then we'll look at today's slate. We'll game plan it a little bit. We'll go game by game, talk through injury news, trade news, all that good stuff. So let's jump right into it. Thomas, hope you're doing all right, man. Yeah, guys, last night was a solid one for me. It was positive, but it wasn't crazy. We played Luca. We hit on a lot of those guys. Core plays went pretty well last night. What went bad? There were a few guys I forced exposure to that went bad, like Isaiah Hartenstein getting hurt. That was brutal. We played Giannis, but we also talked about him not having great performances historically when both Lillard and Middleton are out. So I just matched the field there, so that wasn't too dramatic for me. But yeah, all in all, it was positive. We were significantly over the field on McBride and Dennis Smith Jr., so a lot went well, but definitely could have been better. Lacked upside. I didn't have any like top 100 lines or anything. Just had a lot of lines cash, which isn't what I'm aiming for typically. But moving on to today, Dave, good to see you, man, and appreciate you per usual. If you all could hit the like, share, and subscribe button, would appreciate that a ton. But let's jump into today's slate. It's one we have to talk about. There's quite a few situations for almost every team. Even when you look at the game totals today, there aren't any bad game environments. And so it creates a situation where a lot of guys are viable, and you even see ownership is pretty spread out on this slate. So there's some guys I'm looking at wanting to be over the field and I'm trying to be extra aggressive on. And then there's some guys, at least as of right now, I'm okay with not forcing exposure to. It makes me nervous as all hell, but it is what it is. So as of right now, Hawks going up against the Sixers. Murray is probable, or Hunter's probable. DeJounte Murray is questionable. He's been going through that back injury. Personally, I feel like Murray was only questionable because I thought they were trying to trade him. I'm expecting him to play tonight, but we'll see what actually happens there. And then there's no real extra injury news. Capella's been out for a while there. For me, when it comes to the Hawks tonight, remember Joel Embiid is out. This is the highest total game on the slate. But like I said, all the game environments are pretty solid tonight, but this is the best one. And so, per usual, I am not trying to avoid any of the Hawks tonight, but I do want to force some exposure to guys that I think are a little low owned. If Murray doesn't play, obviously we're playing Trae Young, Sadiq Bey, Bogdanovic. They all see a nice boost. But if he does play, I would like to have some exposure to DeJounte Murray. He's projecting well now, but we'll have to wait and see on the pre-lock show what that actually will look like from a line standpoint. Trae Young is someone I'm willing to force exposure to. I can almost guarantee as long as he stays around 7% exposure, I'll probably make him a leverage play tonight. And then Okongwu, we hit on him last time. I want to go right back there today. The issue is just that there's a lot of bigs who are in good spots on this slate. He's 6,200. Matchup is pretty solid without Embiid here, but thankfully he's power forward and center eligible, and so that's what keeps him viable. If he was only center eligible, probably wouldn't force exposure to him here. But like I said, I like the Hawks. This is a team I want a lot of exposure to tonight. Then we have the 76ers. For these guys, we don't know exactly who's going to play with the guys they traded for. So we know Nicholas Batum will be out. We know Joel Embiid and Melton and Covington will all remain out. But Cameron Payne and Buddy Hield are listed as TBD. So we just have to wait and see if they're actually going to play tonight. I think it's pretty unlikely Cam Payne will see a ton of play because I know he was battling an injury even before this. But if Buddy plays tonight, I am not overly excited about taking shots on guys like Kelly O or Ricky or Smith, Ricky Council's who I meant, or Smith. These guys just wouldn't be very viable plays. Whereas for now, if Hield and Cameron Payne aren't playing, they're at least worth having some exposure to. But when it comes to the guys I'm forcing exposure to tonight, I'm looking at Tyrese Maxey. You all know I like picking on Trae Young when it comes to playing guards against him. But I'll be honest, um, a matchup against Trae Young, it's pretty neutral at the end of the day. Typically, or the Hawks are ranked 15th in the league at allowing the most fantasy points to point guards, which is literally as average as it gets. But we see these guards who have high upside typically perform well against Trae Young. Tyrese Maxey had a 60-point game just a few weeks ago against this Hawks team. Doesn't mean that will happen again, but at 9,200 without Joel Embiid, I'm willing to take a shot on that. Tobias Harris is also someone I'm looking to force exposure to. The Hawks have really struggled against forwards this season. They're ranked third in allowing the most fantasy points to forwards. And so Harris fits the bill for me there. Love the upside and pretty low ownership in this great game environment, the best on the slate. And then Paul Reed is another guy I want to play. He's seeing the minutes, never afraid of Okongwu from a defensive perspective. I need him to be a little bit more aggressive tonight than he has been at his price tag, but I love the spot. So this is the game I'm forcing the most exposure to, and I'm not going to try and get cute and lower exposures to the value guys and just role players from this game. All right. Next up, we have the Wizards going up against the Celtics. These guys are projecting okay. From a news standpoint, we can talk about them. Patrick Baldwin out. Rashawn Holmes is listed as TBD. Bagley's still out. Isaiah Livers is still out. If I think it's a little bit more of a wait and see approach for me here. I think most people, if Holmes doesn't play tonight, are expecting Kuzma to play the 5, which definitely does make him a little bit more interesting at 7,700. So if I land there, if I get exposure to him naturally because of the domination station, I'm fine with that. But he's not someone I'm excited enough about to force exposure to. Hopefully that would just happen a little bit naturally, and I don't want too much of him. Eugene is looking like a very solid value option today on this slate. I will just give the warning that this isn't like let me double check this right quick. I need to make sure need to make sure my notes are completely on point with Eugene. Okay, yeah. So Eugene is extremely viable in this spot, but if Holmes ends up playing tonight, the need for Eugene does go down. We've seen some strong performances from Eugene when he's seen 20 plus minutes, but we've only seen that one time. So there's some risk here, but obviously the upside is there. He just had a 40 plus point fantasy performance against Phoenix a couple nights ago, but he did only see 12 minutes against Cleveland, but that's because Gafford was playing and he had a lot of run there at that point in time. So just want to say, like, I do plan on playing Eugene, but if Holmes plays tonight, I'm not looking there. I just don't think there's a need to force exposure to that spot. So it's really just Kuzma and Eugene for me when it comes to the Wizards tonight, but I'm not forcing exposure to either one of them. Both are just showing up naturally for me at this point. When it comes to the Celtics, going up against the Wizards, this is always the matchup I want to pick on. I don't usually like to play the Wizards when they're facing decent teams. I like playing the decent teams going up against the Wizards. The issue, of course, is that Tatum is questionable, still going through that illness. So obviously, if he plays, he's a very solid play on this slate. When it just comes to pay up options, Tatum's still not someone I'm looking to prioritize a ton, just because I like some of the guys around him a bit more, but I will want to at least match the field if we do get the news he'll play today. So he's not someone I'm trying to completely fade either. There are some guys that I'm going to have to fade just because of the way the slate breaks, but not Tatum for me tonight. Outside of that, if Tatum plays, pretty much all of the other Celtics become much more viable. Brown would become a priority. Porzingis, White, Holiday can take some shots on Pritchard and Hauser as well. But that's more of a wait and see approach for me. And even given the way this slate is already looking and some of the other value options we have, I think I'm really only going to prioritize the starters here. I don't think I'm going to need to get cute with the bench players from the Celtics tonight. The spread is pretty wide. It makes me feel like there's a higher chance Tatum will play. I don't think the spread would be this wide if he didn't play. All right, next up we have the Rockets going up against the Raptors. This Rockets team, man, they just keep having solid matchups when Fred VanVleet is out. These guys are still a little too cheap for this situation. So we're playing these guys once again. To me, we're obviously getting a ton of Amen Thompson tonight. Really hard to get away from him. He's going to be a core play for me tonight unless something crazy happens. Aaron Holiday showing up a good bit for me right now. He won't be a core play for me unless I am missing something as of right now and something stands out later. But I do plan on probably being around field weight there. Dylan Brooks, Cam Whitmore are fine, but not priorities for me on this slate. Same exact situation with Jabari Smith. Unfortunately, Şengün is the one that's really falling through the cracks for me. I don't have a lot of exposure to him. We know how explosive he can be. We know that I like to pick on the Raptors, but unfortunately, there's other centers I'm prioritizing over him that I'm going to force exposure to. And this can obviously change by the time we get to the pre-lock show, but as of right now, Şengün's looking like a fade. So I'm nervous about it. And part of it too is his 20% ownership. And we see this 20% number a decent amount when it comes to projected ownerships on this slate. I just can't force exposure to everybody. And I like to get leverage when I force exposure to guys. And, that's just the way it is. So I like the Rockets. Nervous about the fade on Şengün, but we'll see if it will pan out or if I'm able to get at least a little bit of exposure by the time we get to the pre-lock show. Speaking of pre-lock show for VIP members only, link is in the description if you're interested in that. On that show, it's all execution because it's pre-lock and we have most of the news. I just show what I'm doing on the slate. If Brandon's able to join, we talk through what he's doing as well. Sometimes he'll show exactly what he's doing, and we just go from there. Much more execution, less just strategy. This show's always just the strategy, how we're thinking about it early on, but so much changes throughout a day that, I can't tell you all exactly what I'm doing right now because shit changes. Next up for the Raptors, not a lot of injury news here. Rockets have been a team I don't like to pick on too much. Emmanuel Quickley is looking like he's going to be pretty chalky. Not showing up a ton for me as of right now. I also am not passionate enough about him to force exposure here. We know RJ Barrett, Scotty Barnes, they definitely both have upside. These guys are very viable plays. Like I said, a lot of good game environments on this slate. Ultimately, this is just one that I'm not forcing exposure to right now. All right, this is a game I like a bit more than other people, I think, and that's mostly just because of the lower ownership, and neither of these teams are great defensively, so I'm totally happy and comfortable taking shots here. So for the Hornets, they've made a lot of trades, and so my excitement for these guys could change if some of these guys end up actually playing, but assuming they won't, then I am looking to prioritize Miles Bridges and Brandon Miller. Both have been in fantastic form. It has been a little bit more of a situation where it's one or the other. We haven't seen too many spots where they both have gone off recently, but we have seen that happen historically over the rest of the season. So I'm not afraid. I'm not going to make a rule of if Bridges is in a line, don't put Miller there. I'm just going to force exposure to both of them. Bucks have struggled all season. It is not getting better with Doc there right now. I'm hoping for their sake they can get better, but with the way things are looking right now, I'm looking to still pick on them. So Miles Bridges, Brandon Miller are the two guys. Brandon Miller is probably going to be a leverage play for me if no one else stands out. Miles Bridges, I want to have a little bit of leverage on, so I'm thinking 20-25%. And just as a refresher for some new people, leverage plays for me are guys I'm going to be double the field on. And then Nick Richards is showing up a little bit by himself. I'm fine with that. Cody Martin is probable. If none of the other guards join that the Hornets traded for, if they don't play tonight, then I'm fine with Cody Martin. If they do play tonight, not trying to play Cody Martin. And just to list off a few of those guys, it's Seth Curry, it's Trey Mann, it's Mishik, those type of players. So if they play for the Hornets tonight, not trying to play Cody Martin. If they don't, then he's definitely a fine play, but not someone I'm trying to force in. But he's showing up for me now, so that's why I'm mentioning him. For the Bucks, hard to talk about these guys too much, but I like them. Damian Lillard is listed as TBD. Chris Middleton is listed as TBD. Patrick Beverley, who was traded for who was it? I'm blanking. We literally just talked about him. Campaign. He was traded for Campaign. Is listed as TBD. So we don't really know what this situation is going to look like tonight yet, but I don't really care, to be honest. If even we talked about Giannis struggling a bit when Middleton and Lillard are out. Matchup against the Hornets is soft enough where I'm still going to be at least around field weight on Giannis. If Lillard plays and or Middleton, then I'm looking to be significantly over the field, possibly as high as 30-40% exposure to Giannis. Giannis is my favorite pay-up option on this slate, so I'm going to make him a priority. Damian Lillard is also in a pretty solid spot tonight going up against this team, and so I don't foresee me trying to get a ton of leverage on Lillard, but I do want to be around field weight exposure on him. Brook Lopez, I was hoping he was going to be a little bit lower owned, but I do plan on being over the field on him as well, and I'm willing to force that in. Jay Crowder was the guy last night. I was not on Jay Crowder, so that did help limit my upside a little bit. I think people might be, as of right now, his ownership isn't bad at 13%. I think that's a fair number. If he starts to creep up in ownership, if he's around 20-25%, that's way too high for him. We saw him have a strong game last night, 27 fantasy points at 3,800. Great play. But we also saw him in the same exact situation the game prior against Utah, a much softer matchup, and he played for 40 minutes and only scored 16 fantasy points. Long story short, he has 27-point upside. Hasn't really shown too much there where we can see like a 30-35 point performance, which is what we would really be looking for there to get super excited about him and giving us enough upside to take down a tournament. So Jay Crowder, if he shows up, that's fine. I don't want more than 20%, and I'm not going to force him in if he doesn't show up at all by himself. But I do like other pieces from this game, like Giannis, like Lillard, like Brook Lopez. Those are the priorities for me here. And then, of course, if Middleton is out, it could make a little bit more sense. We'll see. Mr. Five, what's up, man? Hope you're doing all right. Ooh, power, bold statement. Charlotte beats Milwaukee. I mean, it is a bold statement, but it's also completely logical. Like Milwaukee, which is why I'm kind of surprised the spread is so wide at 14 points, which is a little bit concerning, but Portland beat these guys. Utah beat these guys. I think my memory's not always the best, but a lot of these guys have beat Milwaukee here lately. A lot of bad teams have beat Milwaukee. So it's a bold statement, but it's not crazy. Yeah, Thomas, I'm going to 150 today. Kaboom said, Wagwan. Hope you're doing all right, man. NBA has been pretty odd for me. Hope you all have been crushing. I think it's been hit or miss for a lot of people. I think for me this season, it's been pretty much the same. I mean, I usually have like 2 to 3 positive days, 2 to 3 negative days. It's just kind of back and forth for me. I talked about it a little bit yesterday. I don't really get too high or low when it comes to NBA DFS. It is what it is. These guys play so much. You can't really get too in your head or else you're just going to lose a lot. Next up, we have the Nuggets going up against the Kings. This is a team I like, mostly because they're low owned. And like I said, all of the game environments are pretty solid tonight. So it's hard to prioritize games over the other outside of that first game. And so I'm looking at Jamal Murray as a potential sneaky play. I'm looking at Michael Porter Jr. as a potential low-owned sneaky play with high upside against this Kings team. I don't love the Kings tonight, But I do like taking some shots on a few of these pieces. The Kings have been a pretty solid defensive team this season, at least when it comes to fantasy points allowed. So I'm not trying to go crazy here. I would like to be around field weight exposure on Jokic, but if I can't get that with the domination station, I'm not going to go too overboard trying to force it, but I would like to be around field weight exposure. I am currently, so feel good about that. And then I'll probably have around 5% Michael Porter Jr. That's a nice leverage play. Jamal Murray, I'm contemplating making him a leverage play, but more than likely I'll probably be around 10% exposure. But we'll see. For the Kings, the only guy I'm looking at is Sabonis, and that's mostly because of his low ownership and also a decent matchup going up against the Nuggets. We talk about it all the time. Jokic is not a shutdown defender by any means. Usually the reason why sometimes guys don't have high upside performances is typically just because of the foul trouble they might get into when they go up against him. Sabonis has struggled a little bit earlier this season against Denver. Like, he only had a 49-point performance, which isn't awful by any means, but not the typical upside I'm looking for here at this point with him. I'm looking for 60, 70-point games, but I think that's definitely still possible for him. And so I'll at least be around field weight, potential leverage play. Kevin Huerter's projecting decently. He's also looking chalky. Malik Monk is also looking pretty chalky for this team. Don't love the matchup here. I'm not going to force exposure to them, but if they show up a little bit naturally, that's fine. I doubt I'll have any leverage on either of them, though. And then we made it. Last game on the slate. Pelicans against the Lakers. Pelicans. Zion Williamson is once again questionable, and I'm kind of sick and tired of it. He's been questionable for what feels like forever, and he plays more often than he doesn't. Obviously, if he doesn't play, that makes Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum pretty close to core plays for me. I'll probably at least be around 40, 50% exposure there. If Zion plays, I still want to be around field weight exposure on Ingram and CJ just because Semato likes them. The matchup against the Lakers, they've improved a good bit over the last few games. So their defense is really stepping up towards the end of the season, which is something we see for teams who are fighting for playoff spots. But still, long-term trajectory, they're still giving off the fourth most points in the league to scoring wings. And so Ingram and CJ McCollum are the two guys that I'm going to prioritize here and make sure they're showing up in my lines tonight. Joe Val is also questionable. Of course, that creates a little bit of chaos for us with Najee Marshall and Zion questionable. If all three get ruled out, that means we have to start to look closer at guys like Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, Larry Nance Jr., all just become much more viable on this slate, and they're already worth talking about. So have to keep a close eye on the news per usual. There could be other guys who stand out a bit more there too, but just kind of have to wait and see and cross our fingers and toes and hope we get the news early enough to make a logical decision here. You know, the Lakers, we have D'Angelo Russell listed as TBD. We have Max Christie listed as TBD. Jared Vanderbilt is out. Cam Reddish has been out. Gabe Benson, they've all been out for a while. So for me, it's a little hard for me to get excited about anyone here. Let me see if there's someone I'm missing on the Lakers. I would like a little bit of exposure here. If Russell ends up getting ruled out tonight, obviously that would open things up and make more of the role players more viable for the Lakers. It would make me more interested in taking shots on LeBron James or Anthony Davis too. I would lean a little bit more towards LeBron, but if Russell is out, I'll force exposure to both. But as of right now, not having any news, I'm not forcing exposure to any Laker right now. But ideally that will change. They're low owned, and like I said, all the game environments are good here. So I'll end up taking a shot here, but it will depend on injury news. And if we don't get the injury news by the pre-lock show, I'll just pick between AD or LeBron and go from there. So, like I said, appreciate you, Mr. 5. And AD lock today. Okay. Like I said, he's so low owned. I do think it's worth taking a shot on some of the Lakers here. I just haven't made a decision yet between the two, but we will by the pre-lock show. So, interesting slate, odd slate, per usual. A lot of injury news that will impact what we're actually going to do a lot. But there are some spots, especially in that first game, Hawks against the Sixers, that I think people are going to kind of start to get cute on, that I think we can have some decent leverage on. So anyway, appreciate you all. I look forward to seeing everyone who can join on the pre-lock show. See y'all there. And then those who can't, we'll see you on Monday. So kaboom. I think it's a bit too late to say that this is a real revenge game for AD, but you're not wrong. It is literally a revenge game. But all right, have a good one, guys. Peace out.